Hey YouTube, welcome to the channel, and today what we have for you is tips when it comes to getting a home loan when you're trying to purchase your very first house. Okay, so I know a lot of people, especially in my age group, when it comes to buying a house, we tend to think that we have everything in order and that, you know, everything is complete and there's no hiccups or everything's just gonna go smooth, right? One of the things about millennials is that we tend to oversimplify how something really is really complicated, if you know what I mean. And when it comes to buying a home, it's not that the process is necessarily overly complicated. It's just that when you're buying a home, you have to have certain things in line and in order, so that way you don't find yourself, you know, coming out of pocket for way more than you thought you would, or not being prepared for the closing cost when it comes time to actually close your loan. Because there's fees that you're not going to know about, that they're not really going to tell you too much about when you're going through the process of getting your home loan. The main thing to most banks is stability as far as your income goes and your credit, your lines of credit. So if you have, you know, very little line of credit, but your credit is in good standing, and you've had no late payments, no issues, whatever, that's a really good thing. If you have a good job that has a lot of income coming in, you have a high salary, that's going to be a really good thing for you when it comes to getting a house, depending on what pay scale or what home price point you're looking for. Okay, so the first tip that I have for the youth, people in my age group, when it comes to buying a home, is start a savings account early. Okay, your parents, you should already have started a savings account when you were like 16. Okay, when you got your first job as a 16-year-old, there's times when you get a job and you spend money to have fun, you spend money to live because you have necessities, bills, and such, but you should always be thinking about the future, right? That's one of the things about the millennials, and myself included, is that we fail when it comes to thinking about the future, and we think about the right now. Okay, and so when you think about the right now only, you start to forget about the things you're going to need in the future to be successful. Okay, so start a savings account very early. Putting those nest eggs away as early as possible will help ensure that you have more money when it comes to surprise fees and closing costs and down payments and all of that. Okay, second thing, know your credit scores. Okay, people talk a lot about Credit Karma and all these other credit free credit websites. They're actually pretty good. Credit Karma is by far the best I've used. I really love Credit Karma, and it really helps you get an understanding of what you owe, where you're sitting on your credit cards, any debt that you may have. You'll find that on Credit Karma, sometimes you'll go up there and you'll see that you have a collection in your name that you thought you paid. Whether the bill got lost in the mail or whether your payment got lost in the mail, whatever it may be, you'll think you paid it and it's in collection. And I can guarantee it's been years in collection. Those type of things do hurt your credit score, and having stuff like Credit Karma and an account on Credit Karma, those type of things, those websites really help to unearth, you know, where your credit could be taking hits at. Okay, the second thing, assets versus liabilities. Okay, make sure that you're not spending more a month than you can save. And what I mean by that is you're gonna have your bills, you're gonna have your necessities, excuse me, you're gonna have your fun, you're gonna have your outings and whatnot. But the one thing that you do not want to do is you do not want to have a lifestyle that is way more expensive than your income. Do you know what I mean? So let's say you have a job where you're bringing home $1,000 a month. I know it's a little far-fetched, probably not, but let's just say you have a job where you're bringing home $1,000 a month. Okay, let's say your rent is $500, right? You own your car, your rent's $500. With rent, utilities, food, and, you know, phone bill, insurance, and all the other bills that you have, let's say that your total for your monthly bills is $800. Okay, now let's say that you're the type of person who likes to buy the newest technology. You like to try and buy the newest clothes. Now with $200 left, it's going to be kind of difficult, but those type of people who always have to have are the ones that are going to spend their last dime on the newest technology, the newest shoes, the newest pants, or whatever it may be. Okay, so at some point you need to start thinking, when it comes to my future and my savings account, if I have $200 left over at the end of the month after all of my bills and expenses and having fun, what am I going to do with that $200? Am I going to go and just blow it? Or am I going to put some away into a savings account so that way it can keep accumulating? So that way, before I even know it, you got a couple $1,000s, right? So what I would do is I would take that $200 and I would put 75% of that $200 into a savings account. That gives you a little bit more money at the end of the month to have a little fun, wiggle room, stuff just happens. Now, whatever you put into your savings will also be your emergency fund. So your emergency fund is also the reason why you have a savings account. So if your car breaks down, you have the money to be able to get that repair done, so that way you're not losing revenue from your job because you can't make it. Okay, it's all about thinking about everything that could happen in the future, or things that could happen in the future, and trying your best to firewall or protect yourself from potential, loss of wages and issues that can potentially hurt your bank account and hurt your credit. Because if you can't pay your bills because your car broke down, then you get kicked out your apartment because you can't finish paying the month on your lease. That's going to go against your credit. Okay, so the fourth thing, pay back debt. So a lot of people in my generation have a lot of student loans. Student loans are a killer. I mean, trust me, I know they are a killer. But the one thing, if I can give you any advice, the one thing I would say about student loans is call whoever your loan advisors are or your loan officers are, and try and figure out a way to get your payments to the best price that you can get them so you can afford it. Because making payments on your student loans is going to help you way more than just getting a forbearance or getting a deferment. Trust me on that. Getting a forbearance or a deferment is good in certain situations, like economical hardship situations, but when you have income coming in and you can make some payment towards it, you best off making some payment towards it. Also, with Credit Karma, when it comes to paying back your debt, Credit Karma will help you realize what debt you have and what do you need to start paying back. Let's say that you was checking Credit Karma and you noticed that you have a collection for a light bill, and you call the company, and the company is saying, yes, this is what's going on, If you talk to one of their analysts or one of their advisors, they'll work with you and try and bring that price down if you can make a one-time payment, or if you can get on a payment plan. If you can make a one-time payment, they'll take a payment of $500 or a collection of $500 down to some substantial percentage just to get you to make that one-time payment. So that way they don't have to worry about it no more. They've collected. That sometimes is a better option than letting things just sit and go stagnant. Okay. So when it comes to the fifth tip is very, very important, because everybody wants to have the best, right? Everybody wants the house on the hills. Excuse me. But the fifth tip is, how much can you afford? Know how much you can afford. When it comes to a house, it's kind of like a car, but it's kind of not. Okay, when it comes to a house, you're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars potentially, right? So know how much you can afford. Know the areas that you can afford to live in. Okay, so if you have a certain type of lifestyle, if you have a certain type of need to live in a certain area, then you need to think about doing one or two things. Either, if your career cannot afford that, either trying to find ways to get a new career that can afford it by going back to school or learning a trade or getting a certificate or something, or you need to start figuring out what can you do now at the job that you have to start saving more money to be able to afford that location. Okay, so let's say that you're making $40,000 a year, right? generally speaking, the amount of house that you can afford on $40,000 a year is going to be somewhere in like the $120,000 to like the $140,000 range. The thing is that depending on what state you're living in, depending on what area you're looking for, you're not really going to find a whole lot of houses in that range, or not a lot of good houses in that range, right? Usually in that range, you also file under FHA loans. And when you file under FHA loans, they're really strict on, you know, the condition of the house, the roof, the foundation, all of those things that could take the house a value substantially down. And if you can't make the repair, then you end up going into foreclosure and all that. They try to do their best to provide assistance to prevent you from going to foreclosure by giving you, by having all these strict guidelines for a house before you can purchase it. But sometimes, even when you get everything taken care of and the house seems to be in good order, sometimes things happen, right? At some point, the house is going to need to be repaired in some areas, and having a mortgage that's too high where you're not able to still save money to protect yourself from future situations like a storm or whatever. And that's another reason why it's really good to have homeowners insurance. And a lot of loans will not cover you at all if you do not have homeowners insurance. So fifth tip, like I said, know how much money you can afford to spend on a house. Okay, because it's not just going to be the mortgage payment. You're also going to have the taxes for the house, the property taxes for the house. So don't just think, okay, $140,000, my mortgage payment is going to be $600 a month. Perfect. No, it's not. It doesn't work like that. Your area could have taxes for schools. Your area could have taxes for a bunch of different things that accumulate a lot of money. Your mortgage could be almost the same price or pretty close to your taxes. Just really depends on what area you live in and what's around that zip code. Okay. So my sixth tip: create a budget. I know I keep harking on savings and savings and savings, but it's very, very important that you create a budget and you try your best to stick to it. Because what happens is when you just have money, right, and you don't have any plan for it, that money becomes susceptible to mindless spending, or you just over gifting or anything like that, right? It just you kind of put yourself in a position where you're not really sure how much you have, but you have money, so you're like, oh, I can spend it, but in reality you shouldn't really be spending it. So that's why it's always best to try and create a budget and stay within your budget. Okay. Another thing with that, this is tax return season. Tax return season is the best time of the year to put money in your savings account. I know everybody wants to get their tax return, buy a brand new car, buy some new rims, buy flat screen TVs, whatever it may be. Be careful with that. Be careful with that. That's a trap. That's a trap. So when you get your tax return money, whatever that amount may be, look at it like this is all savings. If you need to buy a car, if you need to do this or do that, and it's a necessity, then I understand. But if you do not need to do that, and you're just doing it because you have that extra money now, it's not free money. This is money you've paid into. It's not free. That's another misconception about tax returns. It's not free money. This is money you have paid into. This is essentially your money. You're just getting it back, or some of it back. Okay? So think about, over the course of a year, would you have been just spending that money on anything? Hopefully not, right? So put that money aside, put it into a savings account, start figuring out what you need as a necessity and what you don't need. And then everything else that falls in between goes purely into your savings account. Okay? Seventh tip, and this tip harks a little bit on a previous tip, but appraise the area you want to live in and how much it's worth. Okay? Because, like, for instance, in Dallas, there's parts of Dallas and like Oak Cliff that you can get a house for dirt cheap, right? And the area is going to be not that nice, right? in like South Oak Cliff. Well, not that nice depending on who you are, right? But then there's parts of Oak Cliff in the older historical districts that will cost you, a really pretty penny to live there. So figure out what city you want to stay in, right? And if you can't live in that city, figure out the suburban areas or the other smaller towns and cities around that city that are within your commuting range that you're willing to live in or that you wouldn't mind living in. Okay? Sometimes trying to find a place further outside, the county line will be better than trying to find something inside the county line. So for instance, Dallas County may have higher taxes than the neighboring county, which is Tarrant County. And if they have higher taxes than Tarrant County, and Tarrant County is only 15 minutes away, does it really make sense to live in Dallas County when you can stay in Tarrant County? Right? Now, it just really depends on who you are, but those are all the things you need to be thinking about when you're going into making the purchase or getting into the mindset of making a purchase on a house. Okay? Your realtor, getting a really good realtor who knows the area is going to be very, very, very key to you to successfully finding houses to look at. But the thing with realtors is they're always trying to make that commission. Okay, so they're always going to be kind of trying to throw an upsell in there somewhere. So be careful with that. You have to, you're not a realtor, but you have to kind of put yourself in a mindset to study things and tricks of the trade and figuring out what the best tips are to find a house. Because even though you're not a realtor, or even though you may not know more than a realtor, the realtor may say something and you read on multiple articles or that you've studied and you've learned that no, that's not true. That doesn't sound right. And that one thing could cost you thousands or save you thousands, right? So my final tip, the 8th tip, is a 2-part tip. Consider your closing cost. This is a killer because I'm going to tell you right now, whenever you close on the house, everyone expects there to be that 5, 10, 20% down payment on the actual cost of the house itself, and that's it. It's not how it works. It's not how it works at all. For example, you're going to have other things to go into account, like your homeowner's insurance. You have to pay that premium in advance. Exactly. The entire year's premium has to be paid in advance. On top of that, if the house is older, or if the house has not been sold in a while and there is no survey, you will need to get a survey. Surveys can run you $400 to $600 very easily. I haven't found a company that does surveys less than $400. And another thing with the surveys is trying to get the cheapest survey is not always the best option, because if you get the cheapest survey and that company does not do a good job, you could be cheating yourself on property that's really yours, right? So when they do a survey, they come out and they basically draw a map of what your property line is. If you got a bad surveyor, they may end up giving you way less property than you have, or they may end up, giving you more property than you have, increasing your taxes. So it's just one of the things you need to worry about. You need to keep in the back of your mind whenever you're going through the process of actually buying a house. The second part to that tip, don't forget your move-in costs. Okay. Now, if you're moving from, unless you have, friends with a bunch of trucks and you know how to drive a U-Haul and you don't mind putting in the back and forth, which is still going to cost money, don't forget the move-in costs, because you're going to have an apartment or, another rental that you was living in, or another house possibly that you was living in, and you need to move all of your stuff out of that house into another one. A U-Haul is going to run you a couple $100 because it's going to take you a little time to get all of that stuff transferred over. Then the gas that you have to refill in the U-Haul. So let's say, a trip from A to B drains the tank halfway, right? And let's say to get a tank halfway on a U-Haul, it's $30. Okay, so you got to go from point A to point B twice before you can fill up before you can empty out your previous domicile or your apartment or your rental. Okay, so the money you spent in gas plus the money you spent in the rental, all of that accumulates. Okay, even if you're moving your own stuff, all of that accumulates. So don't forget the moving costs, because those could easily cost you another $300 to $400 if you're not careful. Okay, boxes, tape, all of that stuff does cost money, and people tend to forget about those things. So in closing, this video was just tips, and it was not to discourage everybody, and I seriously mean this, but not everybody is meant to own a house. And what I mean by that is, in a perfect world, everyone should own their own house, and that would be, great, and the world will be spinning in gold. The problem is that not everybody's good homeowners. It's just a fact. Not everybody's really good with money. It's just a fact. And even people who aren't good with money and try to be good with money, sometimes they just can't get it. Sometimes spending is more of a mental thing than it is just a pleasure thing. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes it's not so much that I want. Sometimes it's a mental thing. You never know what this person's been through in their life to make them value buying stuff for comfort, or buy stuff for whatever triggers in their brain to release those endorphins to make them feel a certain kind of way, right? Because everything attacks the dopamine level at some point, whether it's chocolate, alcohol, whether it's nicotine, or whether it's spending. Okay, so please subscribe, like, and comment if you have any questions or anything that you want to contribute to this video and this community to help other people out. Once again, this is Fish and Cheese giving you some tips on homeowners insurance, homeowners home loans, and overall saving and preparing for buying a house. Y'all be easy.